Well, with that, let's go to the CBC's Catherine Cullen. She was watching the update as it happened this morning. She joins us right now from the Parliamentary Bureau. So, Catherine, nice to see you. You know, a lot to talk about here. Mm-hmm. Yes, there is the new funding for Indigenous businesses, but then the Prime Minister also says a deal has been made with the United States, and this is about extending current restrictions at the border.
Yeah, and the context of all of this is important. Michael, you might recall that earlier this week, Donald Trump did say that when they were ready to ease travel restrictions, lift border restrictions, that Canada was going to be at the front of the line, that he thought Canada would be one of the first countries with which the United States was willing to lift border restrictions. Here, on the northern side of the border, you had the Prime Minister saying in response that they needed to wait a while, that everybody needed to wait a while, that he didn't envisage travel restrictions, including the restrictions or closure, whatever you want to call it, at the border, that isn't something that would be lifted anytime soon. So now we have this 30-day extension. Certainly, we can imagine a relief for Canadian officials as they see the situation south of the border and some of the problems that are cropping up there in terms of the number of cases. Here's a bit more of what the Prime Minister had to say about this extension.
We have the border restrictions in place where non-essential travel across the border will not be permitted. We will continue to take the measures necessary to keep Canadians safe while ensuring the continued flow of our essential supply chains on which so many Canadians depend.
And there are a few aspects to that in terms of the essential supplies and why this particular border is so important. Obviously, yes, physical proximity, that's a big deal here. But because so many of our food, for instance, so much of our food comes from the United States, but also medical supplies. And of course, we all remember just, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago now, the concern that flared up when Donald Trump said that he didn't want 3M, maker of those N95 masks that are used in medical settings. He didn't want those masks exported to other countries, including Canada. Ultimately, a deal was worked out there. And so it looks as if that important source of personal protective equipment will continue to be available to Canadians.
Okay. Also, another topic to talk about is Parliament perhaps resuming on Monday. Talk to us about what we heard from the Prime Minister on that subject.
Well, this is it, right? There are negotiations underway right now as the parties try to sort out what needs to happen because they had a deal in place. And as of right now, the plan is that Parliament would return on Monday. Of course, we've seen a couple of extraordinary sittings where we had a reduced number of MPs return to the National Capital Region, or people who lived in the National Capital Region here, to make votes on major pieces of legislation. So the question is, what happens now? How do they proceed? The Liberals are insisting that the best way to proceed would be to have some sort of virtual parliament. They say that's a way for the government still to be held to account, but for there to be discussions that all 338 MPs could take part in, and that it would still respect some of the public health and security concerns that have cropped up, understandably, during COVID-19. The Conservatives, though, not happy with the option of a virtual parliament. They say that would take weeks to get going. And also, I think there are concerns about how effective the accountability measures would be if they don't meet in person. So the Conservatives are calling for a limited number of in-person meetings every week with a reduced number of MPs to hold the government to account. We heard the Conservative House Leader tweeting about the possibility of 3 meetings a week that last about 90 minutes. But it really does seem at this moment as if the Liberals and the Conservatives in particular are at loggerheads over this conversation. If they don't work it out, Parliament is going to be meeting Monday because they couldn't come to an agreement. But Michael, we've seen in the past few weeks, these really do seem to be 11th hour resolutions to these discussions. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Okay, Catherine, thank you for that. Our Catherine Cullen in Ottawa.